This weekend marks the first anniversary of the white nationalist rally that resulted in the death of a counter-protester in Charlottesville. Frontline and ProPublica have been investigating the people at the center of the rally. In a documentary set to air Tuesday, former Charlottesville Mayor Mike Signer tells correspondent AC Thompson he wishes he had known more ahead of time.
It's a city of, just under 50,000 people, and we were this target for forces much bigger than us.
I saw you that night over at the county government headquarters, and you looked stricken.
Stricken is not a bad word for it. I wish that we had known more. I wish that we had been given more information by the state intelligence apparatus.
Did they say anything like, hey, these guys are going to come with clubs, they're going to come with pepper spray, they're going to come with, implements of violence?
No. We had one briefing with 3 members of the Virginia State Police who came and talked to us on city council. They did not present us with any evidence of a credible threat.
As I understand it, about 10 people altogether have been prosecuted from those days. Does that sound accurate to you?
It sounds like it should be a lot higher.
AC Thompson is a correspondent for Frontline and a reporter for ProPublica. He was in Charlottesville that day and has been reporting on hate groups ever since. AC Thompson, welcome to Red and Blue. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's start with that day. Did police in Charlottesville seem prepared or unprepared for the violence that took place?
I can tell you firsthand from being there that it was just kind of stunning how unprepared and how unwilling to intervene in these incredibly violent clashes that I saw they were. But the thing that comes out later is the city did a 200-page exhaustive report on what went wrong that day. And it says all the things that we noticed firsthand. It says, look, the police were not prepared. The state police couldn't talk with the local police on their radios. They didn't share operational plans with one another. But perhaps most important, the local police basically had a policy that they were going to let people fight it out and eventually declare an unlawful assembly. And that, I think, is part of what led to this fatal spiral of violence.
And you say fewer than a dozen people have been prosecuted for incidents in Charlottesville. Do you think that we'll see new charges?
What we know is that the federal government is active there. They just recently handed down hate crimes charges in federal court against the man accused of killing Heather Heyer, James Alex Fields. And we know that there are ongoing federal investigations, so it could be that we see more charges.
Well, in the film, it's fascinating. You tracked down some of these white supremacists. One turned out to be an active duty Marine and another worked for a defense contractor. So what did you find when you actually found these 2 individuals?
What was concerning to me in the case of Vasilius Pistolis was that he was a lance corporal in the Marine Corps at the time. And in encrypted chats that we obtained and social media postings, he just openly bragged about assaulting people. He'd say, look, I cracked 3 skulls today and got away with it. Just incredibly violent things. This is a guy who's getting top flight military training from the best military in the world and has access to high-powered firearms. So for me, that's concerning.
Yeah, and the other case?
The other case is a guy named Michael Miselis, and he had a security clearance to help develop military technology for Northrop Grumman, the big military contractor. And again, you sort of wonder, how do you get a security clearance when you're a member of a violent white power gang?
And so the question I always ask in these kinds of situations is what happened to them? And in specifically these cases, how do they turn out to be connected in any way, shape, or form with these violent groups?
It's not entirely clear to me how they got into these groups, but what I can tell you is for a guy like Pistolis, he was involved in 3 different Nazi groups. And by the time he left the Marine Corps, he was involved with a group that basically advocates the violent overthrow of the United States government and espouses political terrorism. With Mike Miselis in the Rise Above movement, they're not quite as extreme. And again, I don't know how he got into it, but I can tell you that He was at multiple different violent protests with them, shows up in their social media posts and in their propaganda videos.
I mean, it makes you wonder what in their background took place that would lead them to that kind of culture.
You know, it's interesting because I think part of what's going on now is the groups are piggybacking on the devices and demagogic rhetoric coming out of the White House, and they're saying, you know, look, we can bring people who are Trump supporters into our fold. You know, the president will say, look, I'm the least racist person you've ever met. But the groups are capitalizing on some of the things he's saying, some of the rhetoric he uses, to basically go out and find new recruits from the sort of Trump voters.
And we should make clear, obviously, these do not represent the majority of the people who support President Trump. In fact, they would take great offense
No,
at this.
absolutely. And that's the thing. You know, the president is going to say, I don't support these people. But I think what it is I think you have opportunistic sort of piggybacking on some of the divisive rhetoric that's out there. In the same way, look, the military, vast bulk of people in the military are not racist, and they're not in white power groups.
Absolutely.
But there's a handful of them who are pretty scary who are.
So then that raises the question, are these white supremacist groups actually growing in number?
You know, that's all the evidence is suggesting that over the last couple of years, there's been a big spike. It's hard to see now, a year out from Charlottesville, what the state of the movement is. My sort of sense is that some of these groups have fallen away a little bit, and some of them have gotten stronger.
Well, there was a far-right rally in Portland on Saturday. There's another Unite the Right rally scheduled in Washington, D.C. this weekend. How do you expect that one to be different from what we saw in Charlottesville?
So I was in Portland, and that was a pretty tense, scary situation. A lot of people, both on the left and on the right, armed up and ready for violence. The event in D.C., I think, is going to be small. And here's why. It's being organized by the guy who put on Unite the Right. And a lot of the people on the extreme right no longer trust him. And they don't want to be affiliated
because?
with him. You know, they think that Charlottesville was kind of a disaster and he's a bad organizer. And
he hurt their cause?
He hurt their cause, exactly.
And so it'll be smaller for that reason,
I believe it's going to be
think?
much smaller.
And so any guesses on how big of a size of a crowd
I think we're
talking
about dozens rather than hundreds.
Nowhere near what we saw in Charlottesville then.
And a lot of these groups, like, their thing now is they do flash mobs, they do hit and run activism, they do banner drops and postering, and they don't want to be in these big violent conflicts. Some of these other groups have also said, we're done with politics altogether, and now for us, it's about just pure political violence.
Interesting. All right. Well, you can watch Frontline and ProPublica's joint investigation on Charlottesville Tuesday on PBS or online. AC Thompson. AC, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.